My wife mocked my low income and called me a failure, so I waited until success found me and let her watch from the outside. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and I used to think love could survive struggle. When I met Hannah in college, she had this spark that drew everyone in confident. Funny, the kind of woman who could light up a room. I wasn't the loudest or the richest, but she said she loved that about me. "You're grounded," she'd tell me, brushing her hair behind her ear. "You're the kind of man who builds things that last." After graduation, we got married with nothing but a small apartment, 2 mismatched chairs, and big dreams. I worked as a junior technician at a local repair shop, spending my evenings fixing old radios or laptops to bring in extra cash. Every time I came home covered in grease, she'd smile and say, "You're my builder." I believed her. I thought those words meant pride faith in what we were building together. But slowly, the tone began to change. The smiles became shorter. The word builder turned into something she said with a sigh, as if patience itself had an expiration date. Bills stacked up faster than paychecks. I could feel the weight of her disappointment every time she checked our bank app. One night, while I was eating reheated leftovers, she said, "I just thought we'd be further along by now." Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. I tried to tell her I was applying for better jobs. That success doesn't happen overnight. She looked at me like I was making excuses. I still remember the silence after that conversation. The hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of a streetlight outside, it was the sound of something shifting. Something fragile beginning to crack. I told myself it was just stress, that we'd be okay once things picked up. But deep down, I felt it the first fracture in the foundation. I'd worked so hard to build. The first couple of years of our marriage still felt like a team effort. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. On Fridays, I'd bring home cheap takeout, and we'd sit cross-legged on the living room floor, eating noodles out of boxes while talking about the future, how we'd travel someday, buy a house, start a family. I thought those dreams were our glue, but over time, the laughter faded. Hannah started comparing our life to her friends. "Did you see Sarah's post?" She'd say, scrolling on her phone, "Her husband just got promoted. They're already talking about their second house." I'd nod, forcing a smile, pretending not to feel small. Every mention of someone else's success felt like a subtle reminder of what I wasn't. I started working longer hours, picking up every repair job I could find, old TVs, busted computers, anything. My hands were cracked and stained with grease, but the money barely moved the needle. Whenever I'd come home late, Hannah would be sitting on the couch, her face lit by the blue glow of her phone, scrolling through other people's highlight reels. "Maybe you should think about going back to school," she said one night without looking up. "I can't afford that right now," I replied, trying to sound calm. She sighed. "You can't afford not to." That line stuck with me. It wasn't just a suggestion. It was a judgment. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the sound of rain tapping against the window. I kept asking myself when I stopped being enough. When did love become something I had to earn through income? I didn't know it then, but that slow drip of disappointment would soon turn into a flood that would wash everything away. The change didn't happen overnight, it crept in, disguised as sarcasm. At first, Hannah's remarks seemed harmless. "You really worked 12 hours today? Wow, and we still can't afford dinner out," she'd say with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I'd laugh too, pretending it didn't sting. But inside, something tightened every time she spoke. The first real blow came at a dinner party with her coworkers. It was one of those upscale gatherings where everyone talks about stock portfolios and career milestones. I felt out of place the moment I walked in, wearing my only decent shirt, the one she'd ironed with visible reluctance. When someone asked what I did for a living, I answered honestly, "I'm a repair technician." Before I could add that I was training for certification, Hannah cut in, smiling too brightly. "Oh, don't let him fool you," she said. "He's a professional fixer of toasters." The table erupted in laughter. I felt my ears burn, my throat tighten. She kept going, waving her glass. "Hey, it's honest work, right? Someone's got to keep our appliances alive." When we got home, I confronted her. "Why would you say that?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. It was a joke. You're too sensitive. That wasn't a joke, Hannah. That was humiliation. God, you always make everything dramatic. She rolled her eyes and went to bed. I sat there alone in the living room, the echo of her laughter still ringing in my ears. I stared at my hands, rough, tired. But Honest Ann wondered when those same hands stopped being something she respected. That night, I realized something painful. She wasn't disappointed anymore. She was embarrassed of me. And once shame enters love, it poisons everything it touches. After that dinner, things shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. Hannah stopped pretending to be patient. Every conversation about money became a battle. Every silence felt like punishment. I'd come home exhausted, still in my work uniform, and find her scrolling through real estate listings on her laptop. One night she turned the screen toward me. "We should move," she said flatly. "This apartment is depressing. We need something bigger, nicer." I blinked, stunned. "Hannah, we can barely afford this place. How would we pay for more?" She crossed her arms, her tone sharpening. "You always have excuses. Don't you want better for us?" Her words twisted something inside me. Of course I wanted better. I was breaking myself to give us better, but it didn't matter. To her, effort without visible success meant failure. Over the following weeks, her comments grew crueler. When I tried to plan a modest date night, she scoffed. "Let's not pretend we can afford romance right now." Once. After I misplaced a bill, she muttered under her breath, "Maybe I should have married someone with ambition." The one hit harder than any insult before. I spent that night sitting on the couch in the dark, surrounded by silence and overdue notices. The ticking of the wall clock sounded louder with each second, mocking, relentless. I thought about how, not long ago, that same woman used to hold my hand and tell me, "We'll get through anything," but we had quietly become you. That's when I realized something painful, but true. Hannah didn't want a partner anymore. She wanted proof that she hadn't settled. And I was just the reminder of everything she thought she deserved but didn't have. I didn't know it yet. But that realization was the start of my breaking point. Something inside me snapped after that night. I couldn't keep living as the man she pitied. I stopped trying to win her affection and started trying to rebuild my own self-respect. During lunch breaks at the shop, I began teaching myself coding on an old laptop, free online courses, late-night YouTube tutorials, anything I could find. My coworkers joked that I was training to leave, but they didn't know how true that was. Hannah noticed, of course. "What's this new obsession?" she asked one evening, watching me type after dinner. "I'm learning something new," I said. "Maybe I can land a remote job or start something on my own." She smirked. "You, a tech guy? That's cute." Her words stung, but I bit my tongue. Every insult became fuel. Every dismissive look pushed me harder. I'd spend my nights staring at code until the lines blurred into a haze, then wake up before sunrise to go. Fix machines that weren't half as broken as my marriage. There were small victories in my first working app. A few freelance gigs, but I didn't tell her. Not anymore. She wouldn't have cared. I could have built an empire, and she'd still find a reason to mock the foundation. One night, I came home to find her laughing on the phone with someone, her tone softer than it had been with me in months. When she hung up, I asked, "Who was that?" She shrugged. "A friend from work." "Don't be paranoid." The air between us thickened. Something about her tone, the way she said, "Friend," set off alarms I couldn't silence. I didn't have proof yet, but my gut knew. This wasn't just frustration anymore. It was distance. The kind that doesn't fade, it grows. And soon, I'd find out just how deep that distance really went. A week later, I came home early from work, something I almost never did. The shop had closed early for maintenance. And I thought maybe I'd surprise Hannah with dinner, a small attempt to bridge whatever was left between us. The apartment was dim, curtains half drawn, the faint smell of her perfume still lingering in the air. Then I heard her voice, soft, low, and unfamiliar in its tone. I froze near the hallway. "Yeah," she was saying, laughing quietly. "He's still doing his little coding thing. It's adorable, really. He thinks he's building something big." There was a pause. A man's voice responded, muffled through the phone, but intimate enough to make my stomach turn. She giggled. You get me, though. You actually have goals. My heart pounded. I stepped into the living room just as she noticed me. Her face went pale, then hardened like stone. How long have you been standing there? Long enough, I said quietly. My voice didn't sound like mine. She straightened, arms crossing defensively. You're overreacting. It's just a coworker. Coworker, I repeated. You're talking about me like I'm a joke? Well, maybe if you took your life seriously, no one would have to. The silence that followed was heavy. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Something inside me simply went cold. That night, I slept on the couch. She didn't come to check on me. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. Realizing that love doesn't always die in an explosion, it fades in quiet conversations when someone stops seeing your worth in that silence. A new resolve was born. I didn't know how or when, but I swore to myself I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't chase. I'd build something she'd never be part of again, and one day she'd regret ever laughing. After that night, the air between us turned to ice. Hannah stopped pretending to care, and I stopped pretending not to notice. We became strangers sharing rent to ghosts haunting the same apartment. The mornings were silent. No goodbye kisses, no small talk, just the sound of her heels on the tile as she left for work, and the faint slam of the door closing behind her. At first, I thought maybe the distance would hurt her too. Maybe she'd realize what she was losing. But she didn't. She seemed lighter, happier even. She'd stay out late, claiming team dinners or networking events, coming home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. I stopped asking questions. Asking meant caring, and I couldn't afford to care anymore. Instead, I poured everything into my project. My coding was no longer about ambition, it was survival. Every night, I'd sit at that old desk with my cracked laptop, eyes burning, teaching myself to design, debug, and pitch. I built a small website for local clients to book repairs online. At first, it barely worked, but slowly, I refined it, adding features, testing everything until it became something real. One night, while I worked past midnight, Hannah walked by, glancing at my screen. Still wasting time on that? She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. I didn't look up. Yeah, I said quietly. Still wasting time, she snorted and went to bed. That moment felt like a silent declaration. I was done seeking her validation. Her mockery no longer broke. It built me. What she didn't know was that my late nights were starting to pay off. The site had begun gaining traction, small orders trickling in from nearby clients. It wasn't much, but it was proof that I was finally building something worth believing in, even if she couldn't see it yet. By the time spring came, our marriage was nothing but cold routines and polite silence. I'd wake up before her, leave early, come home late, anything to avoid the heavy stillness that hung in our apartment. But one night, as I walked through the door, I knew something had shifted. The lights were on, her suitcase was by the couch, and Hannah was sitting with her arms folded, eyes glassy but resolute. We need to talk, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. I sat across from her, exhausted from another 14-hour day. About what? This isn't working, she began. I can't keep living like this, scraping by, watching everyone else move forward while we're stuck. I stayed silent. She took a deep breath. I've met someone. The words hit like a punch to the chest. His name's Eric. He's from work. He understands where I'm coming from. I remember staring at her, feeling every muscle in my body lock. So that's it? I asked quietly. You're leaving because he makes more money? Her lips tightened. No, because he has direction. You're a good man, but good isn't enough when there's no progress. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I nodded. Okay, that single word seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked. Okay, that's it? What else is there to say? I murmured. You've already left me. You're just collecting your luggage now. She signed the papers a week later. No fight, no dramage, 2 signatures, and a hollow goodbye. When she walked out that door, suitcase rolling behind her, I felt something inside me collapse completely. I sat on the floor of our empty apartment, surrounded by silence and the echo of her last words, "Good isn't enough." For the first time in my life, I believed her, and that belief nearly broke me. The weeks after the divorce felt like living in slow motion. I'd wake up to silence, eat in silence, work in silence. Her side of the closet was empty, but somehow her presence lingered in every corner. The coffee mug she always used, the faint scent of her perfume, it all stayed behind. Like ghosts I couldn't evict. At first, I drowned in anger. Every time I looked at my reflection, I saw the man she called a failure. But then something changed. One night, as I stared at the code on my screen, I realized I didn't have to prove her wrong. I had to prove myself wrong. I wasn't broken. I was unfinished, so I went all in. I quit the repair shop and devoted every waking hour to my project. The small website I'd built for local repairs became the seed of something bigger. Digital platform connecting technicians with clients. I called it Relink. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. The first month I barely made rent. The second, a local newspaper wrote a small feature about a repairman reinventing the service industry. Then came a wave of new users. My phone buzzed with notifications. My inbox flooded with messages from clients and contractors alike. There were nights I'd fall asleep at my desk, only to wake up to new orders, new challenges, new reasons to keep going. It was grueling, but for the first time. It wasn't about survival. It was about creation. I stopped thinking about Hannah altogether. Her laughter, her criticism, they became background noise to the symphony of progress, and slowly, success began to whisper back at me, soft but steady, "You're getting there." Little did I know, that whisper was about to turn into a roar, loud enough for the world and for Hannah to hear. 2 years later, my life barely resembled what it once was. Relink had exploded beyond anything I imagined. What started as a one-man project was now a small company with employees, investors, and contracts across several cities. I still remembered the nights I coded until sunrise, eating instant noodles and praying for a single client. Now, my inbox overflowed with partnership requests. I moved into a modest but beautiful house, not out of vanity, but out of peace. I didn't decorate with expensive furniture or designer brands. I filled it with silence, sunlight, and the sound of my own breathing. Every time I looked around, I saw proof that failure hadn't defined MIT had trained me one morning. I was reviewing new vendor applications when a familiar name caught my eye. Hannah Reynolds. For a second, my heart skipped. Her company, now under a different name, was requesting a partnership proposal through one of our client networks. I just stared at it, the irony almost poetic. Later that week, during a meeting, one of my new hires mentioned her without realizing who she was. "I met this woman at a marketing event," he said. "Used to work at a big firm, but apparently it downsized. She's freelancing now." He's undeamed. Tired, I smiled faintly and moved on with the presentation. Inside, I felt a strange mix of pity and closure. Not triumph. Not revenge, just peace. That night, as I looked out my office window at the glowing skyline, I thought about the man she once mocked, the failure she walked away from. That man had rebuilt himself from ashes she didn't believe in, and somewhere out there, she was seeing my name in headlines. Probably wondering how the man she once belittled became the one she couldn't reach anymore. She wanted proof of ambition. Now, she headed just not the way she expected. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a regional business conference. It was one of those full-circle moments, the kind where the past quietly waits in the wings. Ready to test how far you've really come? I walked into the grand hall in a tailored suit, the kind I used to think was for other people. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and a large banner with Relink Technologies hung behind the stage. After my talk, I was shaking hands and answering questions when a familiar voice froze me in place. "I didn't realize you'd be here," she said softly. I turned. It was Hannah. Same sharp cheekbones, same perfectly practiced smile, but her eyes. They were different, tired, hesitant. She wore a badge from a mid-tier firm, the kind that now sought contracts with us. I felt no rush of anger, no desire to wound her. Just calm clarity. "Good to see you again, Hannah," I said evenly. "How have you been?" She forced a laugh. "Busy. You know how it is." Her gaze darted toward the banner behind me. "Looks like you've done well for yourself." "I've been fortunate," I replied. There was a pause. She shifted her bag nervously, her tone softening. "You always had potential. I guess I didn't see it back then." For a moment I studied her, a woman who once mocked me in front of friends, who called me a failure. Now she was standing on the outside of the life she'd never believed I could build. I smiled politely and extended my hand. We all see things differently in hindsight. Her fingers brushed mine briefly, trembling just enough to betray the mask she wore. As I turned away to greet another executive, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, I realized Di had truly moved on. Weeks passed after that conference, and I thought the encounter would fade quietly into memory. But then the messages started coming. At first, it was small talk Hannah, reaching out through LinkedIn with a casual, "Proud of what you've built." Then came longer ones. "I've been thinking a lot about the past, or maybe we could catch up sometime, no pressure." I never answered. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done. Her words didn't stir anything in me except clarity. I had spent years craving her approval, chasing love that came with conditions. But now, success had given me something better than revenge, gave me freedom. One night, while driving home from the office, I passed the old apartment where we used to live. The building looked smaller somehow, the windows dull, the paint peeling. For a moment, I saw us against two kids, sitting on the floor eating takeout, promising we'd build a life together. I smiled at the memory, not with bitterness, but gratitude. That chapter made me who I was. At a red light, my phone buzzed. Another message from her. "I miss you sometimes. I wish things had gone differently." I put the phone face down and kept driving. The city lights blurred past my windshield, reflecting against the glass like ghosts of everything I'd outgrown. As I pulled into my driveway, I whispered to myself, "You were right, Hannah. Good wasn't enough. I became great. But not for her." For me, that night I stood in my quiet living room, surrounded by peace instead of pressure, fulfillment instead of fear. And I realized something poetic. I didn't need her to see my worth, because now she could only watch it from the outside.